Hello, and welcome to another episode of Chuchu Reviews, the show where I take 4 random, unrelated albums, and I throw them in a blender, and then I review them, I rate them, and I rank them. Simplicity achieved. 3 of the records this week were pulled from the comments, so if you have an album you'd like to see featured, why not drop a suggestion, and who knows, you might just get lucky. So let's introduce this week's combatants in alphabetical order. Firstly, we have Reproduction by the Human League from 1979, which was nominated by Gibbon 56. Next we have Willow She Weeps by John Power from 2006, which was nominated by Steve. Then we have Shifting Skin by On from the year of 2000, which was nominated by Tailtube. And finally we have LA Times by Travis from 2024, which is my own personal pick for inclusion. So, now the battle lines have been drawn, let's be complete rankers and rank up a storm. This is Chuchu Reviews. Coming in last this week, we have Shifting Skin by On from the year of 2000, which was the first album made by Ken Andrews after the breakup of his previous band, the 90s alt rock and grunge group Failure. But here he moves away from the more guitar-based sound and into the trendy zeitgeist of the late 90s/early 2000s. Cue lots of very dated sounding synths, dull trip-hop beats and an overcooked production that's full of blips and bloops and effects that add nothing to the songs. Basically, this record gathers together all the worst production and stylistic choices of that particular era and crams them all onto one 42-minute disc. In a way, it's actually quite impressive. I don't think it's easy to make something this relentlessly awful. It takes a special kind of talent. And make no bones about it, this LP is bad. The majority of the tracklist sounds like the kind of zero-effort B-sides that bands would tuck away on obscure singles and then feel embarrassed about later in their career. Tracks such as If I Get to Feel You and Feel at Home are perfect examples of this. Opener Come On Collapse does indeed collapse under the weight of its crappy trip-hop rhythm section. Avalanche aims to be an emotional ballad but gets immediately torpedoed by its horrible seasick melody. Title track Shifting Skin can shift its subpar incubus aping ass into the dance corner and die a dull death. While Slingshot at least tries to fight against the tide via its mildly catchy chorus but ends up drowning in its own startlingly amateurish instrumentation and ingrained cheesiness. I mean, it's difficult for any of these tracks to truly overcome the production and stylistic woes, but I would admit there are at least a few decent moments to be gleaned here too. Lead single Soluble Words is a synth-infused dirge that picks up considerably with its growling climax and dark-hued atmosphere. Perfect Imposter is a pretty cool addition with its gradual build-up and percussive pulse. Paper Thin Soul has a mildly fun buzz to it, its thick bass synth, scratchy wah-wah guitars and catchy chorus being at least mildly diverting. While Closer, Pickup has a gently resigned vibe and a nice subtly sad emotion weaving through its chilled out trip hop grooves. But yeah, a few nuggets of tasty corn out in a sea of smelly shit is not nearly enough to make this record worthwhile. Sorry Tailtube, I love you, but this record sucks harder than Stormy Daniels on the end of Donald Trump's minuscule cock. 2 stars. Next up we have LA Times by the Scottish rock band Travis, which was the band's 10th LP and was released just a scant few weeks ago in June 2024. And here the band are flirting with a new form of slick production that gives the record a more manufactured pop sheen. But it just doesn't work very well for the band, making the songs sound too clean and blander than they already are. And I'm sad to say that most of the material on this is indeed rather bland. Raise the Bar is far too slick for its own good, its dull trip-hop rhythms and multi-track pop chorus pulling in unwanted comparisons to pappy late-period Coldplay. I Hope You Spontaneously Combust has some fun lyrics but ultimately repels with its anemic composition. Naked in New York pulls the opposite trick, its pleasant folk backing betrayed by a set of lyrics that don't speak of anything except a nebulous like of New York City. It's like, okay, so you like New York. Why? Care to elaborate? No? You do know that folk requires good lyrics to work, right? No? Never mind then. While the likes of Alive and The River are cookie-cutter placeholder Travis tunes that add up to the worst kind of unimaginative filler. But although there aren't any truly great standout tracks here, a few do at least attempt to pass muster. Gaslight has a nice stomping energy to it, even though I do feel it's a bit overcooked. Home manages to pick itself up via a distinctive melody and a good sense of rhythm. even though it does slide too close to the Pina Colada song by Rupert Holmes at times. The opening bus has a simple misery and some pretty, vaguely Eastern sounding riffs hiding among its chiming folk. Live It All Again is a stripped back acoustic tune that nicely calls back to the Invisible Band, while the closing title track, LA Times, amuses with its sweary tirade of rap lyrics and dreamy textures. It's a really weird Travis song, but somehow all the better for it. So yeah, ultimately this LP suffers from some crappy, overblown production and a very wobbly general consistency. Even its highlights are not quite top drawer Travis. As such, it grieves me to have to say that this is probably the band's weakest album to date. 2.5 stars. Next up we have Willow She Weeps by the cast frontman and former member of the Lars, John Power, from 2006, which was his second solo LP. And here we have a rather threadbare album of American blues folk with a deep south or Cajun flavour worked into it. Most of these tracks consist of just guitar and vocals, with only a few cuts indulging in such niceties as bass and percussion. As such, the record really does have a kind of traditional purity to it, which is admirable. But at the same time, the style of the LP never really changes gears, which leads all the tracks to feel overly similar. At first the blues stylings are very enjoyable indeed, but for me the album really starts to lose steam as it goes on, as more and more of exactly the same kind of music comes at you. Mercifully, Willow She Weeps is quite short, clocking in at a scant 31 minutes, but even so, by the end of the record I'm all bluesed out and definitely ready for something different. That's not to say the record is bad, however. In point of fact, each individual track is pretty good. It's only when you put them all together that it becomes a bit too much. Still though, high spots include the twinkling folk of the title track, Willow She Weeps, which is immediately comforting and beautiful, its autumnal foils radiating with a delicate warmth. St. Louis has a good energy to its southern blues stomp. Not quite sure why someone from Liverpool was so mad for St. Louis though. Maybe the back alley pirated DVD market is boss in that area? Old Red Sea and Jumping Bean are more jaunty and enjoyable country blues tunes, their sliding guitars and jiving energy making the toe tap along nicely, while Goodbye is a nice acoustic ballad with arguably the catchiest chorus on the album. So yeah, this is a weird one for me. On a personal level, I'll freely admit that this is not really my cup of tea. It represents a genre that I would never seek out or listen to of my own volition, but I also do recognise a certain level of quality here, and if you do like more traditionally leaning American blues, then there's a lot to enjoy here. So after all the variables have been added into this particular serving of gumbo and grits, what I'm left with, other than wondering why a Scouser would choose gumbo and grits over a doner kebab, a can of Newcastle Brown and a punch up outside the local Aldi's, is a rating of 3.5 stars. Coming in first this week and taking home the Chuchu Reviews Gold Medal, we have Reproduction, which was the debut LP from the new wave synthpop act The Human League from 1979. And of course, when you think of The Human League, your mind immediately sprints off to Don't You Want Me and the commercial synthpop of their 1981 album Dare. But here on this debut, the band are still dwelling in experimental darkness, using the synths to create stark, icy soundscapes that accentuate the feeling of isolation and coldness. The lyrics are also almost entirely downbeat and pessimistic, often touching on frustrations and death. That said, there are moments where the band do break ranks and show a sliver of the catchiness that was to come. Blind Youth has a bit more of a sprightly melody and some sparkly synths pepping it up. Empire State Human brings a catchy gleaming pop chorus to the table that totally belies the general misery of the record. The cover of the Righteous Brothers' You've Lost That Loving Feeling sure is weird, with its bright vocal melodies clashing with its minor key off-kilter backing, but somehow it still works, losing none of the original's insane catchiness. Austerity/Girl 1 has some complex and dynamic synth arrangements that give half a glance in the direction of Genesis, while Zero is the Limit is really cool, starting low but gradually gathering more and more pace and ending up as a fun dash towards the finish line. It makes for a really good closer. But the more atmospherically inclined darker tunes don't slack off either. The likes of the opening Almost Medieval and Circus of Death stoke the gothic fires with their bleak static soundscapes, while the word before last strips things down to near emptiness for a dive into lyrical despair. The eternal moment laid bare. No time to heal. Continual pain, continual pain, continual pain. So yeah, this is a pretty solid album of glum electronica with the odd catchy nugget of pop saving it from total abject gloom. As I'm sure long-time viewers of the channel know, I'm rather partial to records that linger in the dark, and so it is here too. This is quite good stuff and quite impressively ahead of the curve for the year in which it was released. 4 stars! And that's another episode of Chuchu Reviews in the bag. Of course, I know you'd rank these records differently, so why not sound off in the comments and tell me which one would have won for you, and maybe drop a nomination while you're there. Don't forget to like, share, subscribe and all that other kind of YouTube jazz. Make sure to take care of yourself and have a great summer, but most importantly, just keep on ranking.